Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name's Graham. The average dumb Yorkshireman living down under in Australia for the last 50 odd years, now observing the decay of Britain. And I firmly blame the BBC for this. The BBC, as far as I'm concerned, and what I can observe, like the media, all the paid professional media. And the reason for that, if you're paid, you become a captive, a slave of the corporations. Especially if you get into big real debt for real estate and all the status and ego that brings. You will say anything you're paid to say, regardless what you actually believe or know. And this is the crux of the whole matter. What is called the left is actually the very, very far right, what governs them. Anyone thinks that this left movement, pseudo collective of nonsense, what has taken on sexism, homosexuality and climate change and racism as its badges of honour, it's all a lie. It's all, and they want to see what I want to reveal now may come as a shock to people, but this is through a lifetime of research into phenomena. So I'm now reporting on the BBC, which has basically become a parody of a Doctor Who show, if you can understand it, and you may understand by the end of this what I mean. BBC are basically acting like espionage agents now for the far right of Europe, which is the EU. Anyone thinks the far left has been drinking too much, or not watching reading what's really going on here. This far right of Europe, which pretends it's on the far left and Marxism, is nothing of the kind, will reveal this. Because if the BBC were not acting as espionage agents against the British people voted to leave Europe. But the BBC are paid captives, if you like, slaves of the EU, the far right of the EU, and they dare not do anything other than go along with what they're told to do. In other words, they're not free people. The people who voted Brexit are free people. The BBC are not free people, they're captives. They're in a cave. It might have the power of the media, but the media no longer is meaningless when it's all rubbish and nonsense and never reports the facts anymore. And the BBC in that way are now the enemy of the majority of the British people. It's one thing to protect a government, but another thing to protect the people. But not only that, they're now, right this moment, they're only protecting the government, not the people. A nation is its people in a democracy, not the government. And that's a primitive idea that the government is the nation. That's a very draconian 13th century idea indeed. So the British and the government no longer the media, modern media, no longer is delivering the facts objectively presented, but working for a far right of Europe, like I've said, whilst covering this up by claiming it supports all the PC factors that it's got, because that's only a diversion. Climate change, homosexuality, sexism, racism, they're just diversions from what's going on economically towards the average person in Britain and in the West in general. And it is really doubtful, call me cynical, but it's doubtful if the staff of the BBC must have some sort of practical intelligence, must have something there in their head. Maybe not anymore, we don't know. But I doubt if they would carry on if they weren't paid rather well out of the taxpayer to do and say what they're doing and attack people personally rather than discuss the issues. They don't discuss issues anymore. The men act like schoolgirls and attack the main reporters. Journalists attack people like schoolgirls do personally and habitually. Well, they attacked George Galloway in there like, ooh, well, you're threatening me because you threatened to walk away. What is that? That's not a manly thing to do, is it? Manly thing to do is to take someone in debate, in a proper constructive debate, which they're no longer seen capable of doing. Because that's what they do. This is they see, by pretending they're on this far left, is the biggest cover-up in the world is history, by pretending and this is the socialism far left, when it's actually all run by the far left for an agenda to reduce human population. That's what it's all about. That's what the BBC are working towards. And we'll get to this. It's a very important matter. So all the thing is, what they've done, if you notice, most of the left in Australia and in England and in America are captive. They're paid for by the taxpayer. That is the authority or authoritative part of the left, not the plebs, not the classes of collectives they've created through the universities and through the propaganda. But the authorities, the ones who, what they call them, the authoritative people in positions of, suppose, influence and power, these people all paid by the taxpayer, all by the corporations. Hardly any of them, if none of them at all, are independently employed, hard-working individuals adding to the capital of a nation. These are the parasites of the now, draining the capital of the country, and doing so getting paid to destroy their own country and Western democracy, and undermine the idea of a Christian ethic and principle within the moral within the constructs of the political economics involved that should be developing society. And it gets down to what's happened in Australia and in England. They reduced the power of the unions, they attacked the unions, and yes, the unions may have been a bit, if you like, heavy, got carried away and corrupt, but no less corrupt than the corporations and the politicians themselves. And yeah, this idea the unions are corrupt. What is the political system and the corporate system today when it can get away with ripping off the public so big time, and the public don't have that protection, that collective protection that they had under the unions, has been replaced by the collective of people who are protesting about climates or sexism, racism and things like that, which don't do them any good when it comes to their economics and their personal financial situation, like being able to pay their rents and electricity bills. If this is where it starts to look a bit odd, when you're attacking, or you become a collective over things that are nefarious and not actually properly debated anymore, but you're just instructed to go out and protest about these things. But the things that matter, like the freezing of old people, and everyone gets old, the freezing of old people in winter, no one's protesting about that. Whereas before, when the Labour Party was established, it probably was based on more like Adam Smith's philosophies than Marx, if you look at it, in principle. And it came with the women's movements, and when women's got the vote, that's what it became about. The women have got supposed to be empowered, but if your women are in massive amount of debt with their husbands, and they're paying over 25% of their income on rent, and hardly can afford the power bills in winter, then it's gone backwards. The value of their wages has declined measurably. They've had to make it up with using debt, personal financial debt. So not only is the country in a massive amount of debt, the people are also in a massive amount of debt at the same time. So they might say, oh, yeah, we all look wealthier, but it's actually, if you've got top heavy with debt, you've got all that psychological pressure on you. I don't know if it's the same sort. I don't know if it's wealthy at all, is it? The thing about it, the maxim here, as everyone ought to know, is that if you can control the currency, which the Rothschilds set out to do when they did after the Napoleonic Wars, they set out to control the currency, then they could control the governments. And then the same people set out to control the information, then the governments can control the people. That's exactly what's happened with this, the corporate media, that is the basic papers who claiming Putin's causing the strikes in France. I mean, they're becoming a parody of themselves. They don't realise now that they're getting to the point where they're pouring propaganda out that make it silly, dumb. Putin is causing the problems in Europe. Really. Not the EU then, not the far right of the EU causing problems in Europe. It's starting to look rather ridiculous. You've got what you call egg on your face when you're saying stuff that makes no sense at all. And it's in the bleeding obvious bracket that is patently wrong. The thing is that the BBC and all these elite, supposedly elite, there's actually parasites. You can't be an elite and a parasite at the same time. I suppose you can be an elite parasite, you know, there must be different levels and strata of parasitical organisms upon any sort of culture, if you like. And that's what this left is, it's a parasitical organisation upon the capital of the people, the working capital, the people who actually got to work for a living and raise the capital of the nation by their efforts. These people are bludging on that, what we use the term sponging on that, if you like, spivving on it, whatever it is. And that's all they are. They're not actually interested in the basic moral principle, which should be in the economics of a society, that should make sure that old people, especially, no matter what sort of job you've had, no matter what you've done in your life, when you get to older, you ought to be looked after. If your society cannot look after the old people and educate the young with a moral principle how it ought to behave, then the society is collapsing. It's no longer, if you like, it's losing what makes it a civilization. A civilization is not the buildings and the organisation. That is not a civilization. Civilization is basically a basic moral, is based on moral principles of, you know, bringing your children with some self-discipline and willing to learn for themselves for the sake of the knowledge, and looking after to make sure your old people are well and truly looked after. Well, people have to look after themselves in between. You know, once you get to work, you should be out there and do your best to earn a living and all that. But at the same time, the government shouldn't be making it harder and harder for you to pay your power bills by pretending it's saving the climate. And that's costing so much here in Australia and I suppose in Britain with these stupid wind generators, which will do nothing whatsoever towards the climate, but only make the climate problem worse. This is the thing about it. It's so unscientific, this economic action in regard to climate change. They're making the climate change worse, or the environmental problem worse, within the people's homes by denying them the basic comforts of warmth in winter, and in Australia the cooling we require with air conditioning, because people can't afford the power bills anymore. And this is where the left is dead, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, replaced by programmed codex of program clones, if you like, who are paid to say, oh, don't be racist, don't be sexist, don't be a climate denier, and all those things. You know, they collected all these little nefarious ideas that have never really been debated. They're not allowed to be debated, but the mainstream media, and the BBC's part of that, won't allow a proper open dialogue, open-hearted, open-minded debate like it would have done in the 60s and 70s. There's no way that the BBC, I remember the 50s, 60s, would have gone along with any of this without proper constructive argument against it. And I'm all against racism, but there's nothing wrong with loving your country so much you don't want a city full of people coming into it every year, which then needs to. So therefore you've got to make it, the old people really struggle to kill them off, basically, to make room for this new breed of people coming in. That's not protecting your country, that's attacking it, because the people are your country in a democracy. It's no longer the government. The king before, maybe they're better off without the government and going back to a king that was altruistic. Maybe, you know, the royals, maybe Prince Charles ought to think of coming back and say, look, I can do better than this. I can, regardless of what, I can do better. I'm more generous of nature than the government itself, which is making it very difficult, aided by the BBC, to look after the people of Britain. It's a eugenics program. You need to look at what that means. It means by eliminating people who are no longer productive for or any use to corporations, which this came back in the 50s. People need to research this. No use to the corporation, which is what the EU is, They want to sort of bump you off by freezing you to death in winter, because there's no further use for you. And that the BBC can't mention that or carry on or support that means it doesn't give a damn about people, does it? Pretending it cares about people by bringing millions into the country, but not mentioning the old people freezing, can't support that, means it's total, utter hypocrisy. It doesn't give a damn about humans. It only cares about itself, like all parasites do. And that's what they are. They've become a parasitical organisation working for the far right of Europe. And it's about time people woke up to that fact and do their own research. Bye.